The term Jew comes from the tribe of Judah, Yehudah, meaning praisers of Yahweh, like hallelujah, the same root. The 10 northern tribes had gone into the Assyrian captivity. Assyria was conquered by Babylon. The tribes of Judah and Benjamin then went into the Babylonian captivity, where they came back according to Ezra, Nehemiah, and Second Chronicles. And the Jews who'd been exiled, the remnant of them who'd been exiled under the Assyrian captivity, came back with them. Hence, Jew became a general term for all of the tribes at that time. The term before the Babylonian captivity and the restoration from it was Israelites. Israelites. But during the captivity and during the Persian conquest of Babylon, you see in the book of Esther, all Jews, all Israelites were called Jews. Esther and Mordechai, and this is the Feast of Purim now, Feast of Esther. Esther and Mordechai were not from the tribe of Judah. They were from the tribe of Benjamin, yet they were referred to as Jews. So prior to the captivity and the restoration from it, they were known as Israelites, according to whichever tribe they were in. After the captivity of Babylon and the return from Babylon, they all became just simply known as Jews. Now let's go further with this. The 10 tribes were never completely lost. We know this from the New Testament and from Jewish history. You'd be hard-pressed to find which tribe a Jew is now, although people have talked about names like Levi and Levison and Siegel being from the tribe of Levi and so forth, or Davidson being from the tribe of Judah. People have said things like that, and they may have some point to it. But after all these generations and centuries, we can't be dogmatic about it. However, James writes his epistle to the 12 tribes. James is probably the first book of the New Testament ever written, and it was written to Jewish believers, and they existed at that time. We have similar testimonies from various historical sources in the Jewish historical literature indicating the same thing as the New Testament indicates. Nonsense such as British Israelism, associated with Armstrongism and other cultic groups, is baseless, both historically and anthropologically, as well as, of course, theologically. But let's continue. Mitochondrial DNA is incredible. Mitochondrial DNA shows us something. It confirms what anthropologists have always said, or it raises new issues that challenges what they've always said. Mitochondrial DNA has completely debunked the Book of Mormons. There is absolutely zilch evidence that North American or South American or Central American Indians, indigenous Native Americans, were from the Middle East. We know this from mitochondrial DNA. The mitochondrial DNA signatures of Native Americans, North, South, and Central, Canada, the USA, wherever, Latin America, all shows the anthropologists were right. Their ancestors came from Siberia across the Bering Sea. At one point, that's only 50 miles. It's far less of a migration than the Polynesians had to get to Hawaii. Although it was cold up in the Bering Sea, of course, been meteorological weather changes at different points in history, so it might not have always been too cold to cross, or as cold to cross as it is now. They came from Siberia. We know this from the mitochondrial DNA, and mitochondrial DNA debunks the Book of Mormon. I watched a film of Mormon scientists from Brigham Young University, who were genetic scientists themselves, admitting that the Book of Mormon had to be wrong, simply based on mitochondrial DNA. Some of the Mormon leaders began saying God changed the DNA of North American Indians in order to test the faith of Mormons. That's how absurd it became. More recently, presuppositions that the Celts of Wales and Ireland and Scotland and Cornwall and England and the Basque provinces of France, and of Spain and also Brittany and France, it was always thought by anthropologists that they came perhaps 4th, 5th century before Christ from Central Europe, the area around Switzerland, Austria, and the Czech Republic, and certain areas of Germany. That was always the presupposition. But now mitochondrial DNA is challenging that. With mitochondrial DNA, they're able to show that the people who live in modern Wales were the same DNA, mitochondrially, as the Druids and as the ancient Welsh and of the people of Stonehenge in England. But there seems to be a discontinuum with what they thought that they came from Central Europe. It causes a lot of problems to a lot of theories. It validates, and it's completely objective. It's not always 100% conclusive in every single case, but it's nearly 100% conclusive. And when you have a group of people, and the overwhelming majority of the signatures give a particular indication, that is proof. We know from mitochondrial DNA that modern Jews are indeed descendants of ancient Semites. That's proven. It's true of both Ashkenazi Jews and it's true of Sephardic Jews. It's true of Teimanim, Yemenite Jews. It's true. There are problems with Falashas and other Jewish sects, but essentially Jewish people as we know them today are certainly descendants of ancient Israel, says mitochondrial DNA. But let's deal with this idea of Russia. The Islamic world made multiple attempts to invade Europe. In the West, they were stopped by Charles Martel. In Italy and in Central Europe, they were also stopped during the Saracen invasions. They were stopped by the Polish King Jan Sobieski, who defeated the Muslims in the 16th century on the outskirts of Vienna. That's how far they reached. But their attempts in the East were to come through the area of the Caucasus between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. They tried to come that way. That area was inhabited by people known as the Khazar Empire. The Khazar Empire. A king and the royal family and much of the nobility of the Khazar Empire converted to Judaism. They embraced it as their religion. The reason they did it was interesting. It was the only religion that both Christians and Muslims could agree had truth in it, claiming they all came from Abraham. And when the nobility and royalty embraced Judaism, that is Talmudic, it wasn't yet even Talmudic Judaism, but Rabbinic Judaism, many of the Khazars also converted. The Khazars stopped the Islamic invasion through the East. They saved European society in the East, the same as the Polish saved it in Central Europe, and the same as Charles Martel saved it in Western Europe from Muslim invasion. The Khazars who embraced Judaism intermarried with the Jewish communities of Eastern Europe. However, they were still Jews by virtue of religion and circumcision, but they intermarried with the existing Jewish communities. Mitochondrial DNA substantiates this. There have been proposals going back to a book written by somebody who's actually a very good author, a Jew himself, called Arthur Koestler, who wrote the classic Darkness at Noon, how Sovietism emerged out of the ideas of the original Bolsheviks and corrupted it. Koestler wrote a book called The 13th Tribe, and he made his proposition that Ashkenazi Jews, not Sephardic Jews or Oriental Jews, but European Jews, were the descendants of Khazars. They were not biological Jews. They were simply cultural Jews, and Jews by virtue of the religion that had been practiced by their fathers, whether they practiced it or not, by their forefathers. There was only ever a grain of proof in any of that. Again, mitochondrial DNA confirms the Israelite origins of Ashkenazi Jews. However, putting that aside, we have a large immigration of former Soviet Jews into Israel. Now understand something. Under the Israeli right of return, the law of return, if you have one Jewish grandparent and can prove it, you can conditionally be allowed to immigrate to Israel. The reason being that if you had one Jewish grandparent, that's why Hitler would kill you, would have put you in a concentration camp. So the law of return is a response to the dictates of Nazism, of the Third Reich. Many of the Russian Jews, probably between 30 and 40%, are only a quarter Jewish. Or, in addition, many of them are simply married to Jews and wanted a ticket out of Russia to come to a Western country. A great many of the Russian-speaking Israeli Jews are only partly Jewish, at most half Jewish, or married to Jews. Many of them are not of Jewish descent in any major percentage of their DNA. That is true. But to say that Jews as a whole, of the 14 million or so Jews in the world, are not descendants of ancient Israel, that is absolute nonsense. They most certainly are. Stephen Sizer is not only an anti-Zionist, but he made statements that were specifically anti-Semitic. He went into conspiracy theories. He became so vile in his remarks that his denomination silenced him. The Church of England, who are no great lovers of Israel, and who are theologically liberal to the point of, homosexual ordination and same-sex marriage and the rest of it. They compromise with all these things. Even they stopped Stephen Sizer from making these kinds of vile remarks he was making. Most people who look at what he has said do not simply consider him to be an anti-Zionist, they consider him to be an anti-Semite. I also know him to be personally dishonest in terms of remarks he said about me. He had an invitation proposed to debate me on television. I accepted it, and he backed down. He ran scared. At least Alex Awad from Bethlehem Bible College showed up. Sizer didn't. I consider him to be a dishonest person, a bigot, and a coward, and I say that publicly. He's a shame and a disgrace to the Christian ministry. Even his own denomination told him, this stops or you're out. That is Stephen Sizer.